Good evening, everyone. So last week we've covered the dependent origination. Then basically we talk about there are two kinds of explanation, right? So last week we talked about the moment to moment, everyday life, daily activity experience, how the traveling dependent origination can occur every moment. So that is the last week's explanation. So for today, we are going to cover the mainstream explanation, which is this dependent origination that lasts or span 3 lifetimes. 3 lifetimes. So this is a very old diagram, I think used in many course materials, so some may be familiar with it. Okay, so if you look at this diagram, we start with the outer rim. So basically it works like a clock. So the clock has 12 numbers, right? So this one also has just nice 12 numbers. So we start from the top and clockwise. So the first link is avijja, ignorance here. Second one is this sankhara, which is the activities of mental formation. And the third one, that this is something new. They coined this term called patisandhi vijnana. So they call rebirth consciousness or rebirth linking consciousness. So they redefine the definition here. So it kind of changes the trajectory. And what happens is the fourth one will be nama rupa, mind matter. Number 5, salayatana, 6 sense basis. Number 6, phassa, which is contact. 7, vedana, feeling. Number 8, craving, tanha. Number 9, attachment, upadana, clinging. Number 10, bhava, means becoming. And 11, birth, jati. And number 12, jara marana, decay and death. So that's the 12 links. So how does this span over 3 lifetimes? Okay, so what happens is, if you look at number 1 and number 2, they mention this is the past. If you look at the core, the center of the circle near the center point, see the word, the past. So what they believe is before we are born, driven by ignorance and based on our karma, mental activities, karmic formations, then this energy will drive this consciousness into the womb. So this rebirth consciousness is basically like the mind or this energy that travels to the womb. So that's the definition of this 3 lifetimes. So this is the main key factor. This is the deflection point from the previous week. So for previous weeks, we discussed that the consciousness in the moment-to-moment dependent origination, or at least in the suttas, they mention consciousness is the sense-based consciousness. Your eye consciousness, ear consciousness. So every moment you see something, hear something, smell, think, taste, and touch, right? So this is the consciousness, whereas this one is very different. So this one has to go to a womb, right? So the womb is basically this nama rupa. So once there's a life, once conception takes place, then there's mind and matter. So the matter they take is the body and the fetus. And the mind is this consciousness entering the womb. So they call it nama rupa. And number 5, so once the fetus start to develop, they start to develop the senses, start to grow the eyes, the ears, the various faculties in the womb. So they call this 6 sense spheres. And they start to contact. And they have this thing called feeling. And very much the same, not only happen in the womb, they also talk about these things happening, passive side of life, and they also talk about active side of life. That means we always have craving, attachment, becoming. And then there's this, again, another birth and another decay. Okay, so if a person take literally this 3 lifetime model, they will say, okay, this conception that take place, the fertilization that take place, is still not yet birth. It is only delivery, then you call it birth. So there's double birth. So there's one birth and there's another birth. So this is the delivery, number 11, then go through decay and death. So this is like you're going through life, going through life. Yeah, so this is the 3 lifetime model. So you need to pass away first, then you need to reborn again. Yeah, reborn again. So this is the next life, and entering the womb, yeah, and stuff like that. So, so that's how the mainstream model. I give a very brief kind of introduction to this. So the main issue here is this deflection point, this Patisandhi Vijnana or rebirth consciousness. Where does it come from? Where does it come from? Is it from the original scripture? Yeah, so we need to look at this. So of course, today's topic, I'm just looking at the Theravada Sutta, Theravada perspective. I'm not going to talk about other traditions. They might have a different set of scriptures. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how this come about. Yeah, because this kind of changes the total meaning of how you practice this rebirth, this dependent origination, right? Because if all these only take place in the fetus, and the only time you can live is this birth and death, then it's a bit hard to practice. Of course, they want to talk about coming back to here and talk about craving and there's things happening in life also. There's feeling, contact, right? And you need to talk about this how to stop craving, but they don't talk about this rebirth consciousness as every moment to moment living condition. Yeah, they just really talk about 6 sense sphere, but how does consciousness come to play? Yeah, how does consciousness come to play? So this 3 lifetime model don't really answer that. So again, like last week, some people asked the question that they need to see past lives. Yeah, some traditions or some school of thought, in order to understand these 12 links, they need to see past lives. Yeah, if they can see past life, then they're able to see, what come before their fetus, and what's before that, what's their previous birth, what's their previous lifetime, and then so on and so forth. Then they go back, then they can see how the 12 things work. So it's very tedious. It takes one to observe many lifetimes to understand this 12, right? Whereas the more practical approach is to observe every moment. So again, we're going to start talking about the scripture, where you find this thing. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the case for rebirth linking consciousness. So how do people come to this idea that consciousness is this energy that go to the womb, or the mind that go to the womb, right? So the Buddha and Venerable Ananda, in this particular Digha Nikaya 15, Mahanidana Sutta, they were having something like a Q&A, something like this conversation. So the Buddha is teaching, or basically explaining how to analyze this dependent origination. So they come to this particular segment from consciousness as a requisite condition, name and form. Yeah, that means vijnana, consciousness, paccaya nama rupa, name and form. Thus, it has been said, and this is the way to understand how the consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. So the Buddha gave an example. If consciousness were not to descend into the mother's womb, would name and form take shape in the womb? So Venerable Ananda replied, no, Lord. So the Buddha gave this example. So anybody, if they straight away read this the first time, or this is the first scripture they read, they will take dependent origination, this consciousness, as this consciousness that go into the womb. But is this consciousness part of this consciousness? Is this consciousness the same as this consciousness in dependent origination? So this is the question here. So there are a few explanations, a few possibilities that it is the same. Number one, it is this consciousness is the same as this consciousness in the dependent origination, or the Buddha is giving a different case study. So this consciousness is a different kind of consciousness compared to this dependent origination consciousness. The Buddha is just giving an example to try to explain how this consciousness requisite name and form. So how it comes to be is this so-called consciousness, or this, and the commentators call this rebirth consciousness. When you enter the womb, when life starts to begin, then there's nama rupa. When life begins, then you're aware, then you're aware, you're conscious. And when you're conscious, then you're aware of the forms and stuff like that. So this is another explanation. Okay, so we are going to go into other case studies. So this is the first case study to kind of give an idea, how this rebirth consciousness come about. And we are going to look at other case studies, other scriptures. Basically, last week we also talked about some case studies. But how does all this come into play so that you can have a better understanding of the trajectory? So if you do not have more case studies, then the trajectory won't be that accurate. So we're going to talk about other scriptures. Okay, so further in this Digha Nikaya 15, the Buddha explained the consciousness he was referring as the 7 stations of consciousness, not the same as the 6 sense-based consciousness. So again, consciousness have many different definitions. Yeah, so which consciousness is for which one, right? So in this instance, we talk about the 7 stations of consciousness. So the first one being the sensual kind of consciousness, the earthly beings. And we talk about the Brahmic world kind of consciousness, and the jhana kind of consciousness, all the way to the, basically all the jhanas, right? So the first two, number 7, these are the various kinds of states of mind. So different states of mind is also called consciousness. So what kind of consciousness are we talking about? Just like, for example, in the English language, the word light, L-I-G-H-T. Light can have many meanings also. Light can mean the brightness, either dark or bright, black, or is it light or dark? Or light can mean the weight, can mean heavy, can mean light. Right, so depending on the definition of the context being used, you get a very different explanation. Right, so if we use this consciousness in dependent origination, then it will end up being the 3 lifetime. But if we use the consciousness as per the sense-based consciousness, then it becomes every moment. It becomes very different. Okay, so I'm going to talk further, some other further case studies. So these are the suttas, case studies against this rebirth consciousness as being part of dependent origination. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the case study. If it were true that these last 3 lines of this statement, if consciousness were not to descend into the mother's womb, would name and form take shape in the womb. So these last 3 sentences, last 3 lines, is if it were just a case study and not part of this definition, then it is logical to say mother's womb is not, for example, mother would not be part of dependent origination, or the word womb will not be part of dependent origination, not part of the official labeling of the dependent origination. So that would be the second kind of explanation if this is not the official explanation. Okay, so this is a case study that talks about how you differentiate the different kinds of consciousness. Okay, so there's this particular instance, there's this monk called Sati. Yeah? So this Sati is not mindfulness, the Sati. The mindfulness Sati is short A. So this particular monk, his name is called Sati. So according to the pretext of the story, this monk is a proponent of telling Jataka tales, birth stories of the Buddha, and he's kind of expounding, okay, these consciousness go to the next life, and these consciousness go to the next life, and so on and so forth, take rebirth and rebirth. So the Buddha is kind of having this dialogue with this Sati. Is it true, Sati, that this pernicious view has arisen in you? As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is just this consciousness that runs and wanders on, not another. So this monk, Sati, replied, exactly so, Lord. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is just this consciousness that runs and wanders on, not another. Right? And the Buddha is asking, which consciousness, Sati, is this? So there's, again, there are many different definitions. So the Buddha want to be clear, which consciousness. So the Sati replied, this speaker, this knower, Lord, that is sensitive here and there to the ripening of good and evil actions. Yeah, so he's talking about this definition. So the Buddha is criticizing this definition of consciousness with regard to dependent origination. But is the Buddha denouncing karma and rebirth? No, so there's still karma and rebirth, and there is also dependent origination. I give one example. So in Buddhism, we always talk about there is mundane dharmas and there is supramundane dharmas. So mundane dharmas are something like karma and rebirth, something that won't really sort of lead to liberation. Is like good to know truths. Then the supramundane dharma is something like dependent origination, supposed to lead you to liberation. So what happened in this particular context, I'm going to go further, is that this monk is getting a lecture from the Buddha. So the Buddha said, okay, you worthless man, do you understand to me to have taught the Dhamma like that? Haven't I in many ways said dependently co-arisen consciousness? Apart from a requisite condition, there's no coming to play of consciousness. But you, through your own poor grasp, only slender and dig up this root, produce demerit for yourself, which lead to your harm and suffering. So the Buddha defined consciousness as like this, which we discussed last week. Consciousness that arises independent of the eye and the forms is called eye consciousness. And same thing, dependent on the ear and sound is called ear consciousness, and so on and so forth, all your senses. So this is sort of like when we are still living, and then we can experience this. If we are already like passed away, then it's a bit hard to have this kind of consciousness in the thin air. If, let's say, the consciousness is still like traveling from one location of the earth to another location, the space in between, how can you smell and touch and whatever, right? So okay, so before we talk about this aspect, I give benefit of the doubt that sometimes consciousness, right? This monk, this Sati, might be taking this consciousness as something like the soul, something concrete, something solid. It's like a fixed account, and sometimes you got merit, good karma, then you plus, add value. Sometimes you have negative karma, then you deduct the value. So is the account is still the same person, something like that, the same account holder. So this is what this Sati is mentioning. So in terms of circular Dhamma, I give an example. Let's say the water cycle. Are you familiar with the water cycle? How the rain fall, how the ocean body evaporate and then becomes cloud and becomes rain again, right? So in probably maybe in primary or secondary school science, we'll say it's the same water, and the water won't change to something else, right? The water change to different states only, but it's still the same water. Agree? Yeah, so that's what we're being taught. But let's say a quantum physicist came along and then he said, no, it's not the same water. Different energy or different particles or different whatever it is. So it's not the same. It's not the same thing, right? So the quantum physicist is like talking about this dependent origination. So the moment-to-moment dependent origination is a bit like the quantum science, quantum physics of the mind. Whereas the water cycle, that you talk about the same water droplet that goes up in the clouds and fall as rain, that is the normal karma and rebirth. Normal and karma and rebirth. Yeah? So although it's more or less like you think the same phenomenon happening, but very different, very different take. So if a person is just stuck to the understanding of the same water that goes to the sky and fall down, then you forever go up the sky and fall down, go up and down in samsara. Yeah, you always get trapped in the rebirth. But if your understanding is every moment, and you put in practice to observe these impermanence of all this, then there's a chance you might get liberated. You can escape from this cycle. Right, so this is my personal take on it. Right, I believe there are many suttas also that talk about karma and rebirth. The Buddha somehow don't talk about consciousness taking birth into another person, another character. He talks about this particular person goes to another being, a state of realm, a different higher destination, lower destination, and stuff like that. But they don't mention the term consciousness. Yeah. So again, we are going to talk about the birth process. So in dependent origination, the last two links is birth and death. And so in that particular link on 11, this is how the Buddha described birth. So there are three kinds of processes that, three factors to take place. You need three things. You need union of the father and mother. That means you need the male and female to have this intercourse. Yeah, so this is the first criteria, first factor. Mother is in a season, so probably is during ovulation. Then the third one, Gandhabba is present. Gandhabba is present. So Gandhabba is something like a spirit. Yeah, Gandhabba is like a spirit is present. So I believe in the Tibetan tradition, I think they have this thing called the bardo or something, right? So there is some kind of entity is there. Some invisible being is present, to watch, observe what's going on. And then they can have this, with the union of these three things. That means there's the male and female there. The female is in ovulation and the Gandhabba is there. Then the descent of the embryo occurs. Descent of the embryo occurs. That means fertilization takes place. So the fertilized egg or the embryo, right, will descend into the uterus or something. So this is the descent. So these are the three factors. So what happens if any of them is not present? So the first two is the case study. If there's no union of the father and mother, then obviously nothing will happen. So I don't have to explain the rest. So if there's a union of father and mother, the mother is in a season. Okay, so physically, everything is right. Mother, father, they have this male, female having intercourse. The female is having the ovulation, but Gandhabba is not present. There's no invisible being standing beside. Then descent of the womb do not take place. Descent of the embryo do not take place. So some couples may think, we try so hard for so many years and no baby because no Gandhabba, no demand or no supply. So no baby. Okay, so this is the problem. Okay, so the rest of the fetal growth, same thing, 9 months or whatever it is, then the child is born. So this is the case study in the Theravada Sutta, right? So in the modern Theravada Sutta, they talk about consciousness or the rebirth consciousness as immediate. So that's the problem. So if the model being taught by most of the Theravada schools or colleges, they talk about this rebirth consciousness immediate, happen immediately. If it is immediate, then the probability of this consciousness going straight into the fertilization is a bit low. Yeah, the probability is very, very low. It's like trying to say before a person dies, you need to install an app, and this app will tell you who is having intercourse now. Whoever want to take part in this app, they will register. Okay, we're going to have an intercourse now. It's time for you to pass away. So only this happen, right? Then if rebirth consciousness immediate, then it will be possible for a person to create this fertilization. But because at least in the original Theravada Sutta, this Gandhabba is present. So how long can the Gandhabba be there? Is it immediate, or is it can it be hanging around for some time? So there's another case study. Okay, so there's another sutta that talks about this Gandhabba, how they roam around. So it's a conversation between Brahmin and Buddha. Right? So the Buddha is asking this Brahmin, do you know how there is the descent of an embryo, right? So it's the same statement as the past. How does this fertilization take place? How does this conception take place? And this Brahmin, at least the Brahmin religion also sort of agree. Yes, master, we know how there is descent of an embryo. There's a case where the mother and the father have come together. So the same thing, same factor as the first one. The mother is fertile. That means the mother is in the season. And the Gandhabba, right? The being about to be reborn is standing present. Is standing present. So he's hanging around. It's not like, you need to pass away immediately and goes to the womb. So he's standing present. The coming together of these three caused the descent of the embryo. Right? So the Buddha never disagreed. The Buddha is like, okay, yeah, so this is how you answer, right? So this is how it happens. So so only the modern Theravada Buddhism is going against this idea of this being, a Bado, Gandhabba, whatever you call it, hanging around. So the Mahayana will probably, I don't know, maybe they wait for 7 days or 49 days or whatever it is. But the modern Theravada will tell you immediate. It's immediate, right? So depends on how you see it. So they will tell you, oh, maybe the Gandhabba is immediately reborn as a Gandhabba. Then it becomes very different, dependent origination also. Okay. Then another case study. Okay, if this dependent origination, is it truly, is it 3 lifetime? You do really need to see the past lives to be able to have right view. Okay, so you can find this in the Brahmajala Sutta, right? The first long discourse, when the Buddha talks about all the various religious views. And the summary is that whatever religious position you hold, if you still can get angry or still have greed, then that's a wrong view. So even including rebirth, if you believe in rebirth, that's also a wrong view. So don't talk about belief in rebirth. Some people can even see many rebirths. So this is an example. So there's a case, some recluse, Brahmin meditator, by means of other endeavor, right? They do the reflection, they have mental concentration, and the mind quite sort of pure or quite quiet. quite bright. Here they're able to recollect numerous past lives, numerous. So not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, many hundreds of thousands, many hundreds and thousands of births. But if they still can have agitation and vacillation, then that's not knowing and seeing, and it's still a wrong view. So a person can see many, many past lives and still have wrong view. So it's possible. Still immersed in craving. I'm not sure whether you all have watched or whatever. I read this review. I think there's a movie called Infinite. Have you heard of this movie? Talks about some people can see past lives and stuff like that. Okay, never mind. So it becomes a very political. They make rebirth into like a political thing where there are two factions. One believe in rebirth so many times, the world is so sick, to get rid of it, we should destroy the whole world. And they decided to bomb the whole world or something. So it becomes like a terrorist kind of group. So that is the plot. But anyway, never mind. So again, a person can see many rebirths. That doesn't mean a person is free, free from craving. So nowadays, people don't even need to meditate to see past lives. Have you heard of this thing called past life regression therapy? And people just hypnotize themselves and they can know their past lives already. You can skip the many hours of meditation. Just go and see a past life regression therapist. Then you can see a past life. So again, we call this mundane higher knowledges. In Buddhism, we have this thing called the 5 abhinyas, or the 6 abhinyas. 5 of them are worldly or mundane, and the last one being supramundane. So abhinya means higher knowledges. So the first one being divine eye. It means a person can see the angels, see the ghosts and stuff like that. And next one, divine ear, can hear long range, can hear the unseen beings. And the third one, recollecting of past lives. So that's part of the worldly higher knowledges. And the fourth one being mind reading abilities. And the fifth one, something like telekinesis, can move objects in your mind, can fly, can whatever, manipulate matter. And the sixth higher knowledge is knowing how to get liberation. It means able to overcome the defilement. So that's the highest of the higher knowledges. Okay, so this is one example of whether seeing past lives is important or not. So it may be good to know, or it may be harmful to know, depending on your understanding, your view. If a person, like last week we mentioned, I know of ex-monks or meditators who are so inclined to see past lives. Some of them went crazy. So again, if a person is not guided well, not have the proper preparations, then it's become harmful for them. So it's not a useful knowledge. Okay, then the next one is this Susima Sutta. So this is another story, another case example whether seeing past life is important. Does it help in your liberation? So there's this particular person called Susima. So at that point of time, Buddhism was already flourishing, and the devotees or the monks are growing. Then sometimes people from other faith or other segments of society, they are curious. They want to know the secret. Why is the secret ingredient of this Buddhism growing? So one of them is a spy. So Susima is a spy. He decided to infiltrate and get ordained. He managed to ordain and become a monk. So probably the Buddha wasn't around. He got ordination from other monks. So one day he overheard a group of young monks declare that they reached enlightenment. So he was so happy. Then he went over to them and started to interview them. and he asked these monks, do you have all these 5 higher knowledge, able to divine eye? They said no. Divine ear, no. Mind reading, no. See past life, no. Then the enlightened monk said no, cannot see past lives. So he was a bit confused. You don't have all these. How come your religion so popular? Normally, devotees flock to people who claim to have display of certain magical abilities or special whatever, give you special luck, special fortune, whatever it is, and people will swarm to you, flock over to you. But why is your religion growing? You don't have all these things. Yeah. So one day the Buddha happened to pass by, and he was so happy, and he managed to go and interview the Buddha, reported this incident. Hey, I last time I asked your so-called enlightened monks, they don't have all this ability, then how can you call them enlightened? Why is this your religion? Why is it so unique, so special? And guess what the Buddha did? The Buddha taught him how to see the 5 aggregates and see dependent origination. The Buddha taught Susima dependent origination. And once this Susima saw the Dhamma, I presume he got enlightened, then the Buddha asked the same thing back to him. Are you able to see your past lives? Do you have this divine eye and whatever not? So, right. So the first question, are you able to see cessation of ignorance, cessation of fabrication, and the whole of the 12 links? Then the Susima answered, yes, Lord. He's able to see the cessation of the dependent origination. That means he got a glimpse of the Dhamma or even enlightened. Then, having known this, Susima, can you recall your past lives? 1 birth, 2 birth, 3 birth, or many births? And this Susima said, no, I cannot see my past life. I understand dependent origination. I even see dependent origination, but I cannot see past life. Yeah, so this is what the Susima replied. So the Susima understood the Dhamma, so he apologized to the Buddha, asked the Buddha for forgiveness. So this is a strong case. This enlightenment or right view has nothing to do with seeing past lives. Or dependent origination has nothing to do with seeing past life. So this comes to no question. Is these 12 links really spanning over 3 lifetimes? Right? So this is the case studies. Okay, so I've enough with the case studies. So we are back to the sort of practical, talk about how to develop our mind. So back to practice. Earlier on is all theoretical entertainment. Theoretical entertainment. Not important to know. Not so important to know. But if you're more academic or more, if you think intellectual, you want to pursue these kinds of contradictions, then it's good to know. Yeah. Okay. So limited awareness. This is talking about untrained beings. If we are not trained, whenever we have contact with any of the senses, then we will have greed. Yeah? So I'll slowly read the statements. On seeing a form, the eye is infatuated with pleasing forms and gets upset over unpleasing forms. So you get happy with pleasant sights, right? And get upset over unpleasant sights. He dwells with body mindfulness unestablished. So there's no mindfulness, and there's no Eightfold Path. With limited awareness, he doesn't discern as it has come to be, the awareness release and discernment release, where those evil, unskillful qualities cease without remainder. Okay, so a lot of bombastic terms now. Okay, so discern means able to differentiate, able to differentiate, tell apart, whether this pleasant feeling arise, unpleasant feeling arise. Normally we get dragged away, we let things happen autopilot. Yeah, so discernment means there's an intentional effort to try to sort of at least know or give a label to be aware of that state of mind. So this discernment. Okay, so there's two terms, yeah, awareness release and discernment release. So the Pali term would be Ceto Vimutti for this awareness release, and discernment release is Panya Vimutti. So again, the common understanding for these two pathways, these are the two paths to enlightenment. So the common understanding, nowadays they talk about using the commentaries, then they talk about discernment release means a person must attain the 4 jhanas first. Then from 4 jhanas, then they do insight meditation, then they will have this discernment release. So this is the commentarial understanding, commentaries. But the suttas have a very different explanation again. The Panya Vimutti Sutta or the Panya Vimutti Vibhanga Sutta talks about release. Liberation can be done at any levels of concentration, all the way to the highest formless concentrations also. So this is a commentarial problem. Then awareness release, they'll talk about the modern understanding would be a person able to enter all the levels of concentration and viola, then you get this awareness release. Okay, so the more practical understanding would be discernment release means you're able to label, you're able to categorize, able to differentiate in different states of mind. So this is discernment release. So for example, when a person meditate, or maybe some systems, they will ask you to label rising and falling, for example. So you need to mentally create this label, you need to some vocalize, rising and falling. So this is the path of discernment release. That means you're aware of the phenomenon arising and how it passes away. So the observation itself is this awareness release. The observation of the sensation appearing and disappearing, this is awareness release. So this is evidential, awareness release. So there are people who just be aware but never label. So they know, they just observe only. Observe. So can also possible to reach liberation, but if you want to be kiasu a bit, Singaporean, you kiasu a bit, then you do both. You observe and you also label. So the problem here is for pure academics, if they don't really have proper guidance and they just label only, they understand in intellectual. Everything arises and passes away, but no evidence. They never observe anything. Then no impact. And just at the understanding is at the superficial level. So in meditation, we need to observe, we need the evidence, and we also need to discern. We give the labeling. So that's the whole idea. So of course, there are many deeper aspects, like how to label the different levels of concentration and stuff like that. This one require the different schools or different systems to see how far they can teach you. Okay, so unskillful qualities, sees with a remainder. So this is talking about nibbana, unskillful qualities sees without remainder. Okay, but for this case, this person doesn't discern yet. So that means they didn't experience this nibbana. Okay, so when a person hasn't realized this spiritual peace or contentment, then what happens is when engaged in any sense activity, compliance means greed, opposition means anything you don't like, compliance means anything you find pleasing. So he relishes any feeling, he feels pleasure, pain, neither pleasure nor pain, welcomes it, remains fastened to it. So interesting. Pain also you welcome it. So we call this addiction. Painful feeling. So some people like painful feeling. For example, anger. So if we see something unpleasant, then we get angry. So no, I'm not sure people here, but there are people who get angry the whole day. And they know angry is bad. They know anger is bad for health, bad for whatever. But they get angry the whole day. right? So this is a kind of addiction. So welcomes it, remains fastened. So it becomes fastened. It's like a chain, lock you, fastened to it. As it relishes this feeling, welcomes it, remains fastened, delight arises. So getting angry, you feel pleasurable also. It becomes part of their identity already. Okay, so any delight in the feeling, right? Then there's clinging. So once you cling, then becomes becoming, part of your identity, becoming. So one becomes your identity, then becomes conditions birth. So birth of that of that identity, or birth of various formations associated with that identity. So birth, requisite condition, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, blah, blah, blah. So once there's becoming, then this being is subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death. There's a sense of I. Okay, so I give an example. So this is, we are basically revising what we talked about last week. There's this experiment, I'm not sure whether you know about it, the neuroscientists, they do experiment, they create this fake arm, a robot arm. Some more budget one, they use mannequin, rubber arm, but in the science lab, they use robot arm. So they create a robot arm, then they attach these neurosensors to this person, and this person, whenever he moves his arm, let's say the right hand, then the robot arm will also move exactly the same. You move one finger, he move one finger, you move two finger, you move two finger. So move exactly the same. So what the scientists do in the experiment, they cover up the actual arm. So they only let the subject see the robot arm. See the robot arm. So the robot arm, there's no nervous connection to it. There's no nervous connection. So initially, before they do anything, as in before the person is familiar, the subject is familiarized with the robot arm, whatever they do to the robot arm is not his problem. No feeling, it's not your property. But after some time, they familiarize with the robot arm, the subject plays the arm for some time, then the scientists come and take a hammer and start to smash the robot arm. And the person will feel shock, feel pain, feel this pain or loss of this robot arm being destroyed. Right? So this is birth, aging, death, lamentation, and suffering. It's a mental clinging. Mental cling. So it's not just robot arm, it's anything in life. Our family, friends, our property, our house, our clothes, anything. When we let our mind cling or our attention idle there for more than 2 seconds, then there will be clinging. Very fast one, more than 2 seconds, they'll be clinging. So imagine we stay with our whole body the entire lifetime. So we cling to our body the most. So very hard to detach from the body. Okay, so before I move on, any questions? I see some questions appearing in the chat. Oh no, okay. Sorry, it's not questions. Okay, never mind, carry on. Okay, so same with the sound, the hearing, any kind of hearing, your favorite music you hear over and over again, and one day maybe you never hear the music, or somebody criticize that particular artist or that music, then you feel upset. So this is clinging. Once you have this personality, is becoming, then you're affected. You hold a position, then this imaginary, illusory being will take all the damage. Will take all the damage, and you think it's real, then like as if you take the damage. Okay. So in so-called Buddhist psychology, this ego or sense of self comes after craving. Comes after craving. In Western psychology, because the founders of psychology, or the root word of psychology, the word psyche, I think it's a Greek word for the soul. psyche, Psyche, psyche means the soul. So the probably the forefathers of psychology would not probably not have anticipated this dependent origination model. Then they will think this soul, this being is just like how this Sati, talk about this particular person create the action and reap the good and bad, right? So something along these lines. So this being, this entity, or this soul, or this personality will create the action. Whereas in this dependent origination model, it's the other way around. This personality comes after clinging, comes after the thinking. So there's this philosopher, I think it's a French philosopher, probably a few decades ago, I think Descartes, he mentioned this popular term, I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. So it's a very deep existential philosophical problem. Thought. Yeah, how does this I come about? Why do you feel you are you? Where does this sense of I come from? So if he say that it comes from thinking. But before Descartes, 2,500 years ago, Buddha thought of this already. Because of all these thinking, because of all this mental fabrication, this thinking, contact, the feeling, craving, then this I comes to being. Then there's becoming. So this is the, again, certain modern way of simplifying it. I think, therefore I am. But then he never gives solution how to how to overcome suffering. Okay, so we talk about the way to practice, how to practice and overcome the suffering. So earlier on we just talked about suffering, the problem. So now it's a path to unlimited awareness. So to talk about the first paragraph, talk about the Buddha appearing, right? The Dhamma appearing. Second paragraph, right? Any untrained person, and the person discussed above, which is this person who is having clinging. So the person, that means any person who is suffering after hearing the Dhamma, gains conviction, leads the holy life, right? So it talks about ordination. Again, this is an optional path. If you want to ordain, that's good. If you can't ordain, that's fine. Abandons their wealth. That means at least there's some material detachment, large or small, right? Don on the robes and stuff like that. Okay, then talk about virtue. So let's talk about precepts. So earlier on we chanted the precepts. So this is like the essential for a layperson. You need to observe the 5 precepts. I won't go into detail in this one. So the first one would be avoid taking life. That means you don't kill. Practice compassion. So a person has a compassionate mind. Avoid this stealing. So this one is to make yourself become purer. Mentions here. So both killing and stealing have both points of view, also can have both greed or hatred perspective. So killing, normally we think of killing means you don't like, you want to get rid of the particular being. It can be an insect, can be a pest, can be, can be an animal, a human, whatever it is. So normally people talk about hatred. So when I talk about greed, it's like for food. A person go to a live seafood restaurant, I want this lobster, you order it, so it's considered killing if you know it's live and you order it. So if you're the mastermind, you're not the one sort of physically carrying out the action, it's also considered killing. So you try not to make orders. So same thing with stealing. A person can steal out of greed or hatred also. Normally we associate stealing with greed, you want to possess more items. Some people can maybe steal the sabotage. They don't want to. They don't want to possess the item. They just want to sabotage. So, so that's the world. Very complicated. Okay, so the next one is for the 8 precepts and above. So this is for celibate life. So for 5 preceptor is not to cheat your partner, not to be unfaithful. Then abandoning false speech, not to tell not just lies, but also other kinds of speech also, divisive speech, abusive speech, idle chatter. So we speak the truth at the right time and in a pleasing manner. Okay, so this one is additional stuff, probably for monastics. You may not need to know, right? So the monks, this is probably early years in the Buddha's time, when the Buddha is giving this discourse, still not yet like a few hundred over precepts. So he's still talking about a very few simple precepts. Okay, so these are quite standard. You don't have to know, not for laypersons. Okay, sense restraint. So this is the meditation part, sense restraint. So sense restraint, does it mean not seeing, not hearing? That is popular, the monkey icon, right? No, see no, see no evil, hear no evil, right? Not seeing, not hearing. Okay, sense restraint here means on seeing from the eye, he doesn't grasp at any theme or details, and by which if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the eye, evil, unskillful qualities such as greed or distress might assail him. Okay, so this one is retreat mode. So when a person is in a retreat mode, they can afford to not pay attention to details. So the whole idea is you retreat. If let's say a person were to observe a Buddha statue, normally Buddha statue, you see the eyes is cast downwards. Agree? You don't see the Buddha like that. Yeah. But if you were to drive a car and you're like this, you get into an accident. You get into lots of trouble. So in our daily life, sometimes we need to pay attention to detail. So only in retreat mode, it's easier to have sense restraint. You have less duties, you're not quiet, and you can afford to bolt up a lot of things, and then you can not pay attention to details. Sometimes you pay attention to something, you might get upset, you might get distressed or greedy. Yeah, things like for layperson, you need to, I don't know, maybe you need to count money and stuff like that. So for monastic precepts, we don't handle money, so we don't have these issues. Okay, so for this one, on hearing a sound with the ear, same thing, smelling, right, with the nose, flavor, the tongue, so all the senses. We need to just stay with the open awareness. Once you pay attention to details, start to plan, start to organize, then it's not sense restraint. So the first idea is first learn to master this sense restraint. So this is the first step. So that is why going for retreats is important, right? To master this sense restraint or get a taste of this sense restraint. But after having this, does it mean you cannot pay attention to detail forever? Now you still need to pay attention to detail. And the Buddha also need to go for alms round. If he didn't pay attention to detail, he'll trip and fall and stuff like that. So still need to pay attention to detail. But first, there are times you need to chill. You need to have a retreat mode, recharge your battery. So don't pay attention to detail, right? So this is with regard to sense restraint. So this one helps with additional precepts. right? So probably a preset would be ideal, but if not, never mind. So we are going to move on. So the next step is adding layers to the cake. Okay, so now this is mindfulness and alertness. So this one require paying attention to a certain detail, right? So if a person does their daily activities, if they are not paying attention to detail, they can't carry the tasks very well. So if a person were to be alert, they must know. They cannot be like half asleep or going through the motion, autopilot. So they must intentionally know. So according to the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on right mindfulness, the way to create this awareness or alertness is to always be mindful of impermanence. So that's where the sub-vocalization come in. You need to keep on repeating something like a mantra, right? Arising, passing, impermanence, whatever label you want to use. So this is to keep this wakefulness. So no, there are different methods. Some may want to chant the Buddha's name or have other kind of mantras. By all means, it kind of helps also. Okay, then the next one, abandoning hindrances. So once a person has this sense strained and have this mindfulness, then ideally one should seek seclusion. If you cannot find seclusion in the city area, that's fine. If you have a quiet place, maybe a room to yourself, or you can go outside. Nowadays, we don't have these so much of restrictions, right? We can go anywhere, at least in Singapore, and you find some place to find quietness. Then you can sort of meditate. So the place here in the Satipatthana Sutta, not in this sutta, of course, but in the Anapanasati Sutta, mindfulness of this breathing, it mentions also any empty dwelling. So if your house is quiet, also can, no problem. That's also seclusion. So it's a good conducive place to start off. But if you are already like a veteran, any place also can meditate, that doesn't matter. Right? So that's the ideal state. Any place also can meditate. Your happiness is not dependent on outside noise. Outside noise will control your happiness. So, but for beginning, it's good to have certain preparation. Okay, so so these are the 5 hindrances. Earlier on, I think Onchin was asking me about overcoming, I think, strong emotions or something. Yeah, so these are the hindrances. These are basically strong emotions. If we leave our mind to autopilot mode, it will be carried away by any of these 5. We call this the 5 hindrances. Yeah, so these 5 will be there all the way. Yeah. Okay, so it is believed. Okay, so there are 5. So first one is covetousness, which is greed. Second one is anger. Third is this drowsiness. Fourth is restlessness. And the 5th one is this doubt. So only a stream enterer can overcome this doubt. It means if a person reach first level of sainthood or first level of enlightenment, then they can overcome this uncertainty. And to overcome or truly overcome greed and anger, a person needs to become a non-returner, 3rd level of enlightenment. It means very close to full enlightenment. Okay, then to overcome restlessness, a person has to become an arahant, full enlightenment. So in short, it means that this will be there, naturally be there. Some people, when they meditate, They will think, yeah, my mind run here, run there, or start to sleep, or start to daydream, no? And they will think, yeah, I'm not cut for meditation, so I don't meditate. This is very normal, very normal phenomenon. Yeah, only if you're fully enlightened, then you don't have restlessness. Yeah, if your mind have no restlessness, that means congratulations. You don't have to be here anymore. Okay, so but if we still have all these, that means there's still room for improvement. The more we should practice. Right, so these are the 5 hindrances. So how does these 5 come to play? Anytime the mind is not with the Eightfold Path, that means anytime the mind is not deliberately generating right thought, not with your object of meditation, it will drift off into all these 5. So this is called the 5 hindrances. So this is how quick how quick they are. Yeah, so it's like, so it's, I don't know, maybe more than 2 seconds or within 2 seconds, and these things will occur. So right effort is very important in the Eightfold Path. Always repeat. So the way to overcome these 5 hindrances, according to the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the great discourse on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is right effort. Always apply right effort. So if, let's say, you're contemplating on impermanence, every moment, keep on repeating, right? Don't stop. Once you stop, you'll be carried away with these 5. So this is a very short summary of the Mahasatipatthana. Okay, then a person, if they abandon these hindrances, they may enter the jhanas. Right? So jhanas is considered the right concentration in the Noble Eightfold Path. So last week someone was asking, whether jhanas is and seeing past lives, is it related? So in my previous sessions with you all in the Dhammayut, we talked about the meditation, Samadhi Sutta. So jhanas is one kind of samadhi. Yeah, seeing past lives require another kind of samadhi, which is called seeing of light. Yeah, if a person visualize any kind of meditation using a long-term visualization, they may develop certain higher knowledges, which we talked about earlier, the 5 higher knowledges. So seeing past lives is one of them. So that is got to do with visualization practice. So it's different from jhanas. Yeah, but some people can multitask. They can do jhanas and see things at the same time. So that's for people who multitask. Then another kind of samadhi is vipassana kind of samadhi. If a person observe impermanence arising and passing, that is also another kind of samadhi mentioned in the Samadhi Sutta. And the last kind of samadhi is if a person is has abandoned or has detached from these defilements, then the mind will have another kind of samadhi. So probably an enlightened person will have that kind of samadhi. It's effortless kind of samadhi. They don't have to do anything. It's like there all the time. So these are the 4 kinds of samadhi. So a person cannot say watching impermanence arising and falling is jhanas. Right? It's different. So likewise, since it's separated into 4 categories, you cannot equate seeing light as jhanas. Yeah, they are different kinds of samadhis altogether. So of course, a person can multitask. Maybe like the Buddha, he can multitask all of them. He can do jhana, see light, and practice detachment at the same time. So that's for the Buddha. So this for jhanas. Yeah. So in the routine which I teach, normally the jhanas is separate from the visualization part. Visualization is visualization. Jhanas is jhanas. Yeah. Okay, so these are the 4 jhanas, which is mentioned, basically different states of mind. Again, if we go through just in theory, It won't mean anything to you. You just know they are just different emotions. Okay, so unlimited awareness. So a person, same thing which we talked about last week. If a person through their senses, how to get not infatuated with nice sights or unpleasant sights. And they always stay mindfulness, right mindfulness. So the previous few steps I talk about the mindfulness required, having sense restraint, having this mindfulness and alertness. Right? Then what will happen is they abandon. They do not welcome, they do not fasten to these pleasant, unpleasant feelings. And they do not welcome it. Right? So the way to overcome craving is all these steps from before. All these steps from before. You need to abandon all these, do all these things, do all these things. Right? So you do everything, then you can overcome craving. So once you sort of slowly overcome craving, you do not welcome. You do not welcome these pleasant or unpleasant sights. Then what happens is there's reduction of clinging, reduction of the ego. Once craving reduced, then the sense of selfishness also reduced. The sense of ego should reduce. Then once the ego reduced, then they won't be affected so much by the ups and downs in life. So people can, you face all the ups and downs, illness, pain, criticism, whatever it is, then not affected. So this is the mind that has transcended birth and death. But physically, there's still birth and death. It's not like, I practice this, then I won't grow old. If you talk about this happening here and now, then it's talk about transcending. If the mind has overcome its becoming, then physically one still grows old. Okay. All right. So again, same sort of repetition from this Mahasatipatthana Sutta, 5 hindrances. So I talk about all the things in terms of the Four Noble Truths. So the first one, you need to be aware whether it's present, whether there's suffering, you need to identify suffering. So the 5 hindrances are the symptoms of suffering. Even when you daydream and you find it very pleasant, that is also suffering. The mind gets carried away by restlessness. So it requires a person with discernment to identify as suffering. A lot of time, I daydream, very nice, pleasure. No suffering, or where got suffering, right? So a person without discernment, then it's quite hard for them to practice detachment. So it requires a person with discernment to identify, my mind get carried away by daydreaming, by fantasies. Then you need to identify, okay, this is a hindrance, it's a suffering. And then you need to find the cause, how it arises. And it discerns abandoning. They need to abandon. Then eventually, discern, right? No future arising. So it requires this right effort. Okay, so this part of the 4 right efforts. Also the 4 noble truths, right? Abandoning is the cessation of suffering. And no future arising requires lots of right effort. If you're really practicing right effort all the time, part of the Eightfold Path, then you're really abandoning this suffering. Okay, so I end with this. This is part of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. Again, the chorus, always mindful of arising and passing away of all phenomena. So there's no shortcut to it. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Any questions? Okay, so someone is asking, Bhante, what are the characteristics of discernment? how to cultivate discernment inside us, especially when it comes to make choice in daily life. So discernment comes with the all these stages that we talked about earlier, from observing the precepts or having sense restraint. So once there's a reduction of craving and experience, there's some experiential or spiritual happiness, then one can compare. Then there's a comparison. So there is a discernment between sensual happiness versus spiritual happiness. If there is no comparison, then very hard to discern. So a bit hard. So that requires a person to become a stream enterer. So even the 6 qualities of the Dhamma to be known by the wise. So it requires wise people. So no worries for those who have not reached any sort of discernment. Always be mindful of impermanence every moment. So that's the key. At any stage of the practice, be it total beginner or veteran practitioner, always mindful of impermanence. So that's the one and only step. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. Anyone else? No questions.
It looks like Sharon has a question.
Right.
Sharon.
Hi, evening,
Oh, okay.
Bhante.
Yes. Hi,
Yeah, I have a question. So in terms of clinging to worldly things, I think that one is easier to look out for. What about clinging to Dharma? So let's say if last week I heard your talk and then I'll go on YouTube and I want to find more videos of your teaching. So how can we discern that we are not being clinging on and desiring more in this aspect?
Okay, if there is clinging, as long as it produces more anxiety, more tension, then that is part of the suffering. There is craving and clinging. Yeah, if any teaching, the more you analyze, then there's more detachment, more peace, and that is application of the Dhamma in a correct sense. Yeah, so in the search is quite normal for everybody. Everybody need to search for truth, right? So the search will bring about certain anxiety to a certain extent. But once you arrive in at least finding the theory of the Dhamma, then you put a practice law. And the more you practice, and you see whether there's a reduction of craving or not. So if let's say you practice over a period of time, the more you practice, the more suffering, then something is wrong. Then you need to do some troubleshooting.
Right. And how can we apply the Eightfold Path in our normal working life, such that we can reduce anxiety when we're working?
Okay, very good question. So working, again, not easy. Yeah. So my emphasis or my takeaway is that every moment, if possible, either you cultivate every moment loving kindness or impermanence. If you have other practice, maybe reciting a certain mantra, by all means. So there are certain practices which you can recollect the whole day. So you can do it on the go.
Okay, like for example, like Buddha name chanting, we can do it throughout the day.
Whole day, yeah.
And you were saying loving kindness too. We can do it throughout the day. So it's like wishing everybody well throughout the day.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it requires practice. Like for example, if some people they get angry the whole day, don't need practice. Right? So it's got to do with some conditioning. Initially, it might be hard, but after some time, it becomes habitual. You might cling to it first, which is good kind of incentive. So over time, the more you, let's say, the chant, you find some peace, or you find some happiness, then it becomes easier.
Okay, and thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, anyone else?
There is a question in the chat box about why if if consciousness is considered different from one life to another life, then how can some people still recall their past lives?
Okay, yeah, very good. So earlier on we talked about the two different kinds of definition. One is the mundane explanation, one is the supramundane explanation. Yeah, so the supramundane explanation won't talk about this rebirth. Yeah, like every moment when you see, hear, smell, think, taste, and touch, doesn't talk about rebirth. Yeah? So it's like when you see you're still alive, but you don't have to see something and go into a womb, or hear something, you won't end up in the womb. So it's every moment, yeah, here and now. So whereas the mundane kind of consciousness, right, talks about like this karma and rebirth. So in most Theravada suttas, when they talk about karma and rebirth, the Buddha don't mention consciousness. The Buddha just talk about this being pass away and reappear in a certain realm, something like that. The Buddha didn't use the term consciousness. So he kind of like prefer to have consciousness being dissected and analyzed and trying to make it more transcendental. Yeah. So the question is how some people still can recall past lives. Many factors could be past karma, could be genetic. Some people, their genes are very rare. They have small percentage people can recall. Most people can't recall. Yeah. So again, if a person can recall, doesn't recall, depends on each individual's level of wisdom, yeah, to bring that knowledge forward. I think one of the popular case studies recently is I think the World War II pilot or something, this American kid. I'm not sure whether you've seen the YouTube video. When he's young, he's able to recall his past life as a pilot who died in a crash or something. So his parents want him to forget this past life. They want him to live a normal childhood. Yeah? So as he grows older, according to some interview, he seemed to have forgotten. As a child, you still can remember, what plane model and who are his co-pilots and stuff like that. So as a younger age, he can remember. But as he grow older, sometimes it's going to do with your peer pressure, your surrounding conditions. Are they supportive of this supernatural kind of phenomenon, or are they against this kind of supernatural phenomenon? If let's say you're in a very not superstitious kind of or not religious kind of background, once you mention this, maybe some people call the mental hospital. Okay, so maybe you should go see a psychiatrist, something like that. So got to do with condition, your kind of support. So seeing past life, maybe there may be more people who are able to see it, but they want to say it only, right? So it's hard to say. Then the next question, how to help a person to break through their conditions? May I know what kind of conditions are you referring to? Thinking pattern. Okay, again, lots of right effort, right? Because all these thing, no choice, you have to be equal part, right effort. Any other questions? Yeah, non-Buddhist also the same. Right? I believe every religion will have their own kind of prayer or kind of contemplative practices, which they encourage them to do the whole day. you know. So, but most people are not serious, lah. So they don't do it the whole day. Yeah.
Santi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Just now the part about how to manage strong emotions, I didn't really catch what the solution was. So sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, strong emotions, can be
Thank you,
classified
thank you.
into the 5 hindrances. Strong emotions can be classified into the 5 hindrances. So the solution is the same, always put in right effort, mindful of impermanence.
Like how to be mindful of impermanence? Like if it comes at that time, right, then what are we supposed to do? Like
Yes.
I think that yeah.
So the right effort is not about waiting for the problem to come at that time, then you start working on it. It's there's a Chinese saying 临时不烧香, right? And 平时不烧香啊，临时抱佛脚. Something like that. So this right effort is every moment, when we're still okay, and we need to keep on repeating and practicing and observing. Yeah.
Randy, so it means like we always reflect that things can change. So that's why when it changes, then you're not so affected. Something like that.
Yeah. So that reflection part. Again, there are two parts. One is the observational part. So you need to be aware of the evidence, like every sensation all the time. You need to observe the changes that's going on. It can be the heartbeat, it can be whatever it is. So there's something changing. Yeah. So it can be the tension, the muscles of the body, the temperature, whatever. Right. So you can observe these changes every moment. Then there's foreshadowing kind of practice. Like imagine one day my hair will grow old, turn white, will fall off, my skin will fall off, something like that. So that also works. So there are two kinds. Yeah. So the foreshadowing kind is easier to daydream. Easier to daydream. So you start to think of stories and dramatize. So it's better to come back to something evidential.